Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Till technology takes over, I want to just spend a little bit of time telling you a little story. My son studied at the Mayo College in Ajmer, and we were living outside India in those days, and we decided that we'd come and meet him. It was the month of August. And we borrowed my wife's cousin's Maruti van. And we were driving towards Ajmer, and as luck would have it, somewhere just before Jaipur, and this was at about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, the wiper stopped working, and it was raining. So you can imagine it's pretty pathetic trying to drive in those conditions. But we stopped by, thank you, we stopped by at a little dhaba to have a meal, and there was this truck driver who came to us and said, "Sahab, आपको तकलीफ हो रही होगी गाड़ी चलाने में?" मैंने कहा, "हाँ, बहुत तकलीफ हो रही है यार, बार बार रुकना पड़ता है." He immediately pulled out from his pocket a packet of Charminar cigarettes, and he pulled out the entire tobacco, and with his hand he rubbed the tobacco on my windshield. Now, if you understand the concept of surface tension, you would appreciate the water doesn't stay on the windshield anymore. And the water kept flowing, and I drove all the way to Jaipur without a problem, because the tobacco made sure that the water didn't stay on the windshield. Simple concept of innovation. But this story doesn't stop here, because it's a little more that I want to tell you. In any case, we couldn't rely on Charminar cigarettes. I'm not a smoker, so that makes it even worse. So we decided we'll go to the Maruti shop in Ajmer, and we told him that, "Look, भैया जरा थोड़ा एक आप ये mechanism जो होता है इसका ठीक करा दीजिए." He said, "साहब 750 रुपए लगेंगे." मैंने कहा, "यार लगते हैं तो लगने दे, ठीक तो कर तू." And this guy came back after 10 minutes, said, "हमारा स्टॉक खत्म हो गया साहब, आप वापस जाते हुए जयपुर में करवा लेना." And we were at a cycle shop buying a cycle for our son, and the cycle wala said, "साहब आपको क्या तकलीफ है कि आपका वाइपर चल नहीं रहा है?" मैंने कहा, "हाँ भाई ये प्रॉब्लम है." कहला, "आप मेरे साथ आइए." And there in the gullies of Ajmer, we went into a small little shop where a person wearing at least power 6 or 7 glasses, small room with 2 lathe machines. And very unhappy man, bilkul zindagi se pareshan type of look. And he came out with us, he looked at it, he removed the mechanism, and he says, "ठीक है, आधे घंटे में आ जाना." So, ठीक है. We came back after half an hour, and without talking to us, he fitted it back. He says, "Button dabao." I pressed the button, and these went shine, shine, shine. The bloody thing started working like a dream. So I said, "कितना लगेगा भैया?" Said, "10 रुपए दे देना आप." So 2 phenomenal examples of how a person sorted out a problem for me. And I understand from my wife's cousin that for several months after we came back to Delhi and left the car with him, the wiper continued to work. So I want to introduce to you guys the most globally competitive concept called jugaad. So let me tell you a bit about the anatomy of jugaad, because problem with being an MBA is that you want to put a model to everything. So sure enough, I'm going to share with you. Then we'll talk about jugaad and corporate competitiveness. And finally, just a point that I want to tell you is, jugaad is a colloquial Hindi word. I'm sure you know what's jugaad, I know what's jugaad. It's an innovative fix. It's a solution that bends the rules, or a resource that can be used as such, or a person who can solve a very vexatious issue. You must be having a lot of friends who say, "Yaar, bada jugaadu cheez hai." So that's the kind of guy we say, because from enterprising street mechanics to political fixers, it's a tribute to native genius and lateral thinking. Mr. Edward de Bono, the master and guru of lateral thinking, came and spoke here, and he says, after, he's 83 years old. He wrote his first book when he was 37. He says, "After 46 years, I've come to know that all I talked about was alive and kicking in India, and I never knew that." So what's this thing? This is really the symbol we all have of jugaad. Those of you who come from Western UP would see this fantastic vehicle with 30-40 people on it. The brakes don't work generally. It's not registered, nothing of the sort. And when you have to stop it, one guy jumps from the vehicle, he has a wooden block, and he rushes and puts it in front of the front tire, and then it stops. And then people get off and life goes on. So keeping this, let me give you a few jugaad examples. We have Lucky Singh in Ludhiana. He can produce this beautiful copycat marker pen very efficiently. The only trouble is, he never asks, am I making it for a kid or am I making it for an expedition that's going to Antarctica? Because he must understand requirements differ substantially. If engineers only look at what they make, they'll never prove a success in life. If engineers look at their capability to make what the consumer wants, that's when innovation becomes useful. So we have Bharat Patel of Gujarat. I used to work for GlaxoSmithKline and I was the brand manager for Eno Fruit Salt, and this is a real life example. Bharat Patel is a guy in Gujarat who makes 30-40 kilos of dhoklas. The thing about dhoklas is you need time for them to fluff up. You know, जब जितने हल्के होते हैं ढोकले उतना टेस्टी है. मुंह में पानी आ रहा होगा आप लोगों के. खैर, anyway, he uses a simple trick. He buys the large pack of Eno fruit salt and he puts Eno fruit salt. Why? Because Eno fruit salt contains, and he told me this. He says, साहब इसमें सोडियम बाइकार्बोनेट है और टाटारिक एसिड है. टाटरी जो होती है जिससे हम थोड़ा उधान काइंड ऑफ लाते हैं खाने में, वो टाटरिक एसिड है. और सोडा बाइकार्ब तो हम यूज करते ही हैं. तो हमें तो जब ताजा मिल रहा है तो काहे को मैं जाके दूसरी जगह से लाऊं. सो Eno fruit salt is used to make dhoklas lighter. And if you go to places like Pudukkottai in Tamil Nadu, you will find that even idlis are used with Eno fruit salt. Another simple example of jugaad. And like good old Patel, millions of Indians use creative means to solve problems on their own. And in the process, they generate ideas which sometimes turn into profitable businesses. So having looked at this concept called jugaad, let's not just dismiss it off as something that a small guy in Western UP does, and let's see how we can make this into a globally competitive concept. And I want to share with you this pyramid. To me, the anatomy of a jugaad has 3 levels. The first is the engineering level. The second is the experiential level. And the third is the existential level. Let me explain. Engineering level is the capability to make it. So Lucky Singh ने लुधियाना ने में copycat कर दिया, marker pen बना दिया. That's engineering. Existential is what Nissan does. What does Nissan do? They want to launch a car for Europe. They will first send a team to experience what does it take to be a motorist in Europe. What does it mean driving on the Autobahn? What does it mean driving down the French Alps? Let me add to my engineering knowledge the experience that the person who's going to finally enjoy my engineering knowledge must get. That's called experiential. And beyond that is existential. Existential is about talking to consumers, figuring out things that they themselves perhaps don't know. If you get the time, read this beautiful book called Made in Japan by Akio Morita, and he talks about how Walkman was discovered. They actually started speaking to people, and everybody said, we'd like to have music on the move. Now, there was music on the move. When you were in a car, there were car radios much before Walkman, but there wasn't a situation where you weren't in a car and you still could move. And based on that, consumer insight developed the concept of a Walkman and then went on to do great wonders. You must have heard of a gentleman called Karsanbhai Patel. He's famous for Nirma, the one detergent that completely shook levers out of their slumber. Now the rule in India was that if you used power from the grid, you had to pay 24% excise duty on making detergents. What Karsanbhai did was, he did a survey in his village. He got hold of a dozen what we would call in North India mushtandas. You know what mushtandas are? Mushtandas are these massive guys who stand by doing nothing except whistle at ladies when they go past and then exhibit their muscles. They're called mushtandas. What he did was, he would put 4 or 5 mushtandas at a time on cycles. They would very fast, they would move the cycles for about an hour, and the cycles were collected to a turbine. And the turbine generated power for his unit. But because he was not using the public power grid, he did not pay 24% excise. And therefore he sold the product far cheaper than levers. That is experiential. That is existential. What we must all realize is this concept of dialogue. You see, we mistake debate and discussion. Read this beautiful book by Amartya Sen called The Argumentative Indian. We love to argue. जैसे ही हम लोग dialogue, नाम dialogue है. Dialogue का मतलब क्या है? Dia means two, log means logic. Dialogue means दोनों की logic सुनो. लेकिन हम लोग यही सोचते रहते हैं जब वो बंदा अपनी logic कह रहा है, पता इसको जवाब क्या देना है? हमारी logic क्या है? We, unfortunately, are great debaters, great argumentators. We are terrible dialogue people. Which is where I always believe we are wasting time with Pakistan. Both of us are the same. We will never really arrive at any conclusion. We'll keep on debating. Hamara point maar do, hamara point maar do. That's all we're into. So if you guys, as the future, and I think Bakshi Sahab and Govind Sahab very rightly pointed this out to you, please move away from this discussion, debate and arguments. Get into understanding dialogue. Dialogue means भैया तुमको क्या चाहिए, तुम्हें क्या तकलीफ है बताओ ताकि मैं सॉल्व कर चूं, ना कि मैंने ये बनाया कि भैया तू यूज कर नहीं तो देख ले अगली अंधेरी गली में मिल लेना. Please understand this. Engineers don't only make great products. Engineers make products that change the world. You got to decide what you want to be. Dialogue is critical, and you only move to that existential peak if you get into a dialogue, find out what people want, and then innovate to give them what they want. Because remember, it's not easy. There is this fish called the salmon, which those of you Bengalis in this audience would know of a fish called the Hilish Mach or the Hilsa. And I can see some of you almost watering in your mouth because it's the most fabulous fish to ever eat. Now think about the salmon or the Hilish is that they travel they're sea fish, but they travel into the river thousands of miles to lay 2,500 eggs, but only 2 out of those eggs actually survive because the others are all eaten up. And that's something we need to understand. Innovation is a funnel process. With 2,500 ideas, maybe 2 will come through. And the sooner we understand this, and we are beginning to understand this, the sooner we'll realize that there's a lot of effort that goes into innovation. We have the capability of doing it. Let's add to it all those elements of existential, experiential engineering. Let's add the element of patience. And this is, gentlemen and ladies, what the future will look like. A true story about November last year, when a dozen executives from companies including investment banks of Rothschild and Goldman Sachs and the tech research firm of Gartner ringed at conference table in a brownstone, New York, Upper Side development. They were there to learn how US businesses could develop products more cheaply and quickly by borrowing strategies from India. The speaker, Ravi Raju, who heads the recently formed Center for India, etc. at Cambridge, summed up the advice in one word. And the word, ladies and gentlemen, was jugaad. Have fun. Thank you.